All right, looks like we're live and kicking. How the hell do you share this stuff? I don't know. Well, here I am, ready to talk about relationships, communication, and thank you for those of you who show up live, and of course, everybody watching on the replay. I have no notes. My new thing with these live videos is to go completely unscripted and unplanned and just see what happens, and try to keep it a bit more kind of natural, I guess you might say that way. And I was single for a very long time in my 20s, not by choice. It was because nobody wanted to be with me. At least I thought so at the time. And that was painful because I was really single, like nobody even touched me kind of single for many, many years. But it allowed me to take an observer position. I was surrounded by people who were in relationships while I wasn't. I was often the third wheel. And because I wasn't in one myself, I was lucky enough, I guess you might say, to witness the communication between couples. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was learning a lot. I was learning about what works and what clearly does not work. And it was also, I could see it in my own relationships. I had a big relationship when I was, my late teens to early 20s. That was my first big one. And I had a series of very small and insignificant ones at the tail end of my 20s, and now I'm in another big one. I'm getting married in 2.5 weeks. And I've coached a lot of couples, and I'm constantly, because I'm just obsessed with psychology and social dynamics, I'm always watching people and listening to them. And there's definitely good ways to communicate and bad ways to communicate in terms of a long-term healthy relationship. And what I've observed is it's not different from, romantic relationships, through friendships, through family, even business relationships. The same principles apply across all of them. And the same problems come up for everyone. By the way, for those of you watching live, if you have any comments or questions, chuck them in the comments box. This is a freestyle chat. I'll be here for about half an hour, just yapping away. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, especially any dilemmas with your communication with your partners and your friends, family, chuck them in there. Whilst I sip my Earl Grey tea with one sweetener. I think what I could do is start off with what I used to do wrong and what I've learned doesn't work for everybody. What I thought was just my problem turns out the same problem a lot of people have. I think the first thing that comes to mind, there's two main things. One is being indirect about what you want. And the other would be various forms of unhelpful confrontation styles. And quite often these two are the same thing. You'd be unhelpfully confrontational about what you want. The third thing I think would also be, and it's underneath the idea of confrontations, it'd be withholding resentment. Resenting your partner, your friend, for some minor grievance even. But holding it in because you didn't want to cause a fuss, or you didn't think it was a big enough deal to speak about, or you didn't think it was the right time. Being sexually ashamed, that's a big one. People can talk quite openly and honestly about a number of topics, but they usually have sort of one thing where they really struggle to talk about. Maybe it's sex. It's often money. It can be talking about each other's families if you're in a partnership. There'll be some topic where communication just goes out the window and you're a mess because you have deep shame issues around that topic. this off. My phone does that little interference thing. Let's start with being indirect about your needs and your wants. I talked about this before when it comes to covert contracts. I did a talk about that a while ago. There's people come into relationships with these expectations. And one of them is this weird expectation that other people should know what you're thinking and know what you want. That you should only have to give the very subtlest of signs. And the other person should read that and act accordingly. And you get a lot of this like passive aggressive or covert aggressive or subtlety in people expressing what they want and what they don't want, their preferences. And then the resentment builds up from there when the other person doesn't get it, or you assume they did get it and are deliberately like withholding. And I was just classic for this, and it went both ways. So one way it went, let's say I was upset with my girlfriend. Instead of saying, I'm upset with you, I would just sulk. I'd give her like the cold shoulder. I'd be like brittle with her or kind of like, yep, nah, that's fine. Yep, nah, it's all good. Yep, nah, don't worry about it. Yep, that kind of thing. And at the same time, be hypersensitive to her because I also think I've got to try and read her code. Like she's not going to tell me anything directly and I have to guess. So I'm always really like watching things. Is something wrong? Are you all right? Did you want a water? I'm just constantly trying to guess what she wants all the time. Which is kind of provoking her to use my same method of indirectness. In fact, she doesn't want to tell me anything she wants because I'm so over the top guessing that if she was to tell me directly, I'd overdo it. Or because I am guessing right a lot of the time, she starts to lose any interest in being direct, and then she gets into the same bad habit that I do of being indirect. And this has only one possible destination, which is eventually they're not going to get it, and you're going to come to the conclusion that you've been showing them clearly what you wanted and that they've been denying you or deliberately evading and punishing you. When, of course, the truth is they don't have the fucking clue what you want because you're so indirect. And because it doesn't matter how long someone's known you, they cannot read your mind. They don't know what you're thinking. You do. You think it's obvious. But there's absolutely nothing obvious about the way you're asking for it and presenting it. And so you get this miscommunication where you think, I've clearly shown what I want. They've clearly decided not to give it to me. Therefore, I'm not important to them. And the story begins. They don't like me. They're selfish, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, on the receiving end, the person's like, God, you never tell me what you want. And then I'm in trouble for not giving you what you want. I'm not a fucking mind reader. I'm all hypersensitive now, trying to figure things out. I resent you for it. And this resentment just builds. And this is usually in combination with both people also having a difficulty expressing resentment. So now they're being covert in what they want and resenting each other, and they can't talk about either of these things very well. And there's if you read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, there's a section about a social psychologist who does research on couples, and he does this very compelling research where he figured out he can accurately predict how long a couple's going to last together to within a few weeks, and he's got like a 99% hit rate. Like he'll get a couple, he'll film them, he'll watch the film, and then he'll tell them, you're going to last about another 6 months. And he's like always right. And what he's looking for is contempt. So the absolute poison to a relationship is contempt, where you look down on the person that you're with. A relationship can survive many things. It just cannot survive contempt when you despise someone in that way. And the recipe for contempt is resentment plus time, right? So when you have these little bits of bitterness and resentment, this frustration it might feel towards your partner for not meeting your needs, or for your friends for not getting it, or your family for not understanding what you want. It doesn't go anywhere. It sits there like a little lump of poison. And then the next time it happens, you add another thing to that lump and it builds. Until eventually you fucking hate someone and you can't really explain why. Except they just drive you crazy. Without the realization that you've been dishonest in two ways. One is you weren't direct about what you want. You didn't swallow your pride and say, okay, maybe they are not going to guess. Maybe I just have to tell them, and that's not their fault. They're not weak or lacking in ability in any way. It's just people need people to be direct. It doesn't matter who you are, right? So you're being dishonest by being indirect. And then you're also being dishonest about resentment when it comes up. If you're a nice guy like me, you'd get resentment and you'd try to like depersonalize it. You'd say, well, she's got her reasons and, I'm just being oversensitive and blah, blah, blah. And you try and talk yourself out of being resentful or blame yourself for having resentment towards them. Or if you're the opposite to a nice guy, if you're kind of like narcissistic or leaning towards that, you think everything is everybody else's fault. And so the resentment is like, she's done this to me, he's done that to me. He's purposefully hurting me. And you don't talk about that. When I used to like suppress my resentment and kind of rationalize it and get rid of it, I would end up with nothing to talk about. But what I didn't realize is that it was still there. I just couldn't admit to myself that I felt it. That I was that petty. I couldn't admit that to myself. And because I couldn't admit it to myself, I couldn't admit it to, my partner or my friend or family, whomever it was at the time. I didn't want to talk about resentment. I didn't want to come across as whatever it might be, weak or petty. And it's actually so fucking easy to prevent both of those two issues, the indirectness and the resentment. I won't beat around the bush. I've already done enough foreplay here, but better communication skills, just be more honest. That's the solution. I don't need to flesh it out any further than that. Just be honest. Direct, bold, courageous, vulnerable, radically honest. It'll cause problems. Well, actually, it'll reveal problems. It won't cause them. But it won't cause nearly as many issues as dishonesty will. And it'll also solve any issues that dishonesty has caused. You see, honesty, people think honesty hurts. I was watching a video today, Patrice O'Neill, who's my superhero of honesty. He's the most honest person I know. If you want to know who he is, I'll put him down in the comments here. Patrice O'Neill. He's a comedian. He's dead now, but you want to know what honesty looks like, check him out on YouTube. So he was making a point. He's like, why do we have the term brutal honesty? Why is honesty brutal? Why don't we have the term brutal dishonesty? And he's absolutely fucking spot on. Honesty cannot hurt you unless there was dishonesty prior to it. Unless the honesty is revelation, it's a shock. I want you to just take that on board. Your honesty doesn't hurt someone. Okay? It's the revelation of the dishonesty that hurts them. The only reason it hurts is because you're now revealing that there was other dishonesty. You're revealing something that they weren't aware of, and people really resent that. When you say to someone like, oh, look, I've really despised you for the last 6 months because of that thing you did at the party, they feel like a fucking idiot because they didn't know for 6 months. Like they're naive, like something's happening behind their back. It's a really betrayal type feeling. But it wasn't the honesty that's hurt them. It's the 6 months of dishonesty. That's what hurts. You're just revealing it. Had you at the party before 6 months, at the time said, look, dude, I wish you wouldn't do that, it wouldn't have stung very much. And again, it wouldn't have been the honesty that hurt them. It would have been their false expectations that hurt them. They were hoping you couldn't be upset. Turns out you were. You being upset doesn't hurt them. Their belief that you couldn't be upset is what hurt them, and you just broken that belief, and that's what hurts. People are scared of being direct about their needs. They come up with these big stories. Oh, somebody should just know what I want, or it's just common courtesy, or it's just respect. The truth is, you're saying I'm scared of rejection. I don't want to go for it directly because then I can't protect myself against rejection. And I'd say most communication skills issues in relationships, friendships, whatever, come down to rejection or avoidance of rejection type emotions, embarrassment, humiliation, shame, confusion, loneliness. We avoid being directly honest because directly honest can take us to those emotional states, or so it seems. Failing to recognize, of course, that being dishonest with someone that you're in a partnership with of any kind, after a while leaves you feeling quite lonely because they don't really know you. And you're just left alone with your own thoughts, and you have to suppress things all the time and pretend all the time. And you always know deep in your heart they don't really know you, and that makes you feel incredibly lonely. But of course, trouble is when people go to be honest, they don't do it very well. And I guess that's what we're kind of talking about today. People think, like, the classic one is asking someone out on a date. So many people think asking someone out on a date is the same as showing attraction towards them. But it's not. It's not at all. There is no evidence in asking someone out for a date that you're actually attracted to them. It's assumed, it's implied, but that's not direct. Direct is saying, I like you, or I'm attracted to you. Asking someone out is merely implying that you want to spend time with them for some reason. That's a huge spectrum of possibility, of which only a small part is attraction. There could be a lot of different things going on there, People saying something like, oh, no, one of my classic ones is like, what do you want for dinner? Instead of saying what you want for dinner, You ask them a question because you want to set them up for you to give them your thing. I used to ask people questions as foreplay, as like a prelude to manipulating them into saying something that I wanted as if it was their idea. It was a complicated little process, but it worked pretty well for me. So I might say to someone like, oh, what do you feel like for dinner? And they'll be, oh, I don't know, chicken. It's like a negotiation. They've now given me the first possible price. And now I go into my little thing chicken, I don't know, it's been in the fridge for a while, it's a bit old. Let me have a look. Oh, there's some steak here. Instead of right at the beginning saying, I want steak for dinner, and just throwing it out there, ready for a confrontation if they don't want steak, putting myself out on the line. And I know that example might sound silly or small, but it's that kind of example that's at the heart of relationships not working very well. Because it's shit like that happens all the time. These little just indirectness between people. People saying, I hope this happens rather than can you do this? Just directly asking for it. It's funny because when you receive it, when you're on the receiving end of someone being like this, it's so frustrating. You're like, just fucking say it. Christ, I don't want to do this code breaking shit. And then you'll go and do it yourself with no sense of irony, no sense of hypocritical, But being honest is about letting go of the outcome. The reason being honest usually goes poorly for people in relationships is because it's so needy. Being honest has to be something you just put out there, and if nothing goes your way, so be it. Being honest means you're in the group and everyone's trying to decide what to have for dinner, and you're like, I want pizza. And in the end, everybody goes and buys Chinese food and you don't get your pizza, but that's fine. All right. You don't try and maneuver them into buying pizza. You just make sure that your vote went out there and you lost the vote, and that's fine. Another key issue. This was a massive wake-up call for me. In my first relationship, after it ended, I was reflecting back over it. And I realized I'd never really directly told my girlfriend at the time how I actually felt about it. I told her I love her, like in that kind of, I don't know, that like that packaged way that people just say it, like, all right, yeah, I'll pick up the chicken. Yep, love you too. It's just like a word you throw at people as like a replacement for a full stop. It doesn't have the meaning to it. You don't even know what you mean when you say it, right? But I'd never really like expressed attraction for her or told her like my feedback on her personality or anything like that. I'd never really done it. And then I realized I hadn't done it in friendships as well. I just kind of relied on it being implied. Like if I hung out with a guy a lot, I assumed he knew that I liked him. So I'd never actually tell him that I liked him, unless I got on drugs or something, and then I wouldn't shut up about it. And I remember I used to see that a lot with my friends back when we used to take a lot of party drugs and stuff. A guy would never ever tell you how he felt about you because it's just so against the culture until he dropped a couple of pills. And then all night long, he'd just be confessing his undying love for you. Yeah, nah, you're good, bro. You're a good cunt, bro. I fucking love you. Nah, I don't tell you enough, bro. I love you. And you get like 4 hours of it. Just do your head in. Of course, you'd be doing it back to them. Um, and you hear about this all the time, this regret that people have, like, I wish I had told him that I loved him, before he died or whatever. Quite often, the most interesting conversation you can have with someone is to talk about how you feel about each other. The things that you notice about them, the things you like, the things you don't like, the things you find interesting, the things that capture your attention, the things that in your mind make them unique amongst the crowd. You assume they know these things, or it's not something that's appropriate to be spoken about, perhaps, or that it would be awkward. And yet, how the fuck is someone supposed to know how you feel about them? If all they've got to go on is like your behavior and your body language. People just aren't that good at reading that shit. They're not. And they read it really wrong too. I mean, in my experience, women are generally better than men at this, at like figuring out how people feel about each other. But even they don't really get it unless it's done directly. And the trouble is when people do it, they often also do it in this bias towards either the positive or the negative. So you might have a boss who only ever criticizes you, and it doesn't even cross your mind that they might actually like you, even though they do. They just don't have the ability to say the positive stuff. Or you might have a partner who only ever compliments you and never critiques you. One of the things I learned is, with my first partner, she never believed me when I told her, that she looked good or something like that. I used to think that was like a woman thing. It's like they're always so insecure about their looks, you can't compliment them. What I've since learned is actually they only don't believe you when you're an unbelievable person. But if you will be also the same person who will bluntly say, it looks like you've been putting on weight, or the person will say like, oh, it fucking really annoys me when you speak like that. Or like, your mum drives me crazy, really. I want to be nice to her, but she's annoying me. If you can say that stuff, then when you say you look gorgeous tonight, they'll assume you're also telling the truth. Because they know you've got no fear saying a truth that's going to hurt. So why would you lie about a positive one? You've never tried to seek their approval before. And I guess that's at the heart of a lot of communication issues, is that approval seeking. You're constantly trying to think of a good way to say something, the right way to say something, the appropriate relationship building way to say something. That's the irony, I guess, of all of this. Is if you're trying to communicate in a way to make the relationship better, then you're probably not going to. This is really hard for me to put into words that are understandable to someone who hasn't ever experienced this. But communicating in a way where you're trying your best to be honest, even if that means destroying the relationship, is the best thing for the relationship. When you try to think of it, a way to say it right, a way to say it that will be well digested, a way to say it where you won't be judged or misunderstood or won't get a big reaction. If you're trying to think of a good way to say it like that, odds are all you're doing is trying to think of a less honest way to say it. And for those of you who think that you are already bluntly honest, I'm guessing you're not actually. You might be quite judgmental, perhaps. Or you might be loud, or you might be someone who suppresses anger and then snaps, so it comes blurting out in outrage. That's not the same as confidently honest. Not even really close. There's a book. It's called Radical Honesty. It's by Brad Blanton. And in terms of communication, especially with someone you love, friend, partner, family, this is my top recommendation for how to speak genuinely. Now, it always goes 50-50. You have to find someone who's willing to reciprocate this style of communication, but I want to finish by giving you an example of what I mean by radical honesty. So the other day, I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but one of my difficulties when it comes to being honest is expressing myself when I'm stressed. Stress is a weird emotion for me. I suspect it's actually a kind of simplified version of lots of different emotions. I'm still on a journey of trying to unlock my emotional range. I suppressed emotions for most of my life, and because of that, I don't have a great emotional vocabulary. A lot of my emotions, I just call them stress because I don't actually know what they are. They might be, say, confusion, they might be frustration, might be anxiety. They all just feel the same to me. They all just feel like stress. I think it's because I just never really allowed them to expand out. So because of that, when I'm feeling stressed, I start to struggle to put it into words. Because I also have shame about being stressed, being a confidence coach or whatever I call myself. I've got this very high expectation of myself around emotional stability and control. And this can put me in a situation where I'm backed into a corner where I know I'm stressed, but I don't want to admit it to myself or anybody else for that matter. And when you don't want to admit something to yourself, but you've got to say something, your language becomes very restricted. But I found a little workaround. I actually did this a few years ago, and I just used it again recently. Is if I don't know what to say, I feel blocked. And I've learned that actually to unblock myself, I need to say I'm blocked or I'm feeling blocked. And my girlfriend and I have an understanding as well. She knows what I mean when I say this. She knows I'm trying to express something that's emotionally painful for me, but it's 50 people trying to get through a doorway at the same time. I just can't get anything out. I'm just sitting there. Usually this is after about 5-10 minutes of fuming by myself, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on, trying to solve the problem rather than say it. So I'll just say I'm blocked, and then from there, I'll start sort of layering on top of that. I'll be oh, been sitting here for 5 minutes. I'm stressed the fuck out about something. She'll say, what? I don't know. I feel like blaming you for something. Don't know why. And we'll just talk it through. And eventually, she kind of draws it out of me. Say it. Don't solve it. To finish up, that's my key message here. When we talk about communication skills, I may have given you the impression I'm going to give you some tactics or some strategies. I'm actually, it's the opposite. all those tactics and strategies prevent you from communicating in a way that will build a connection. And that way won't necessarily be clear. You might stutter and stumble. You might say things you don't mean, and you have to correct yourself afterwards. You might start talking without any idea about where you're going with this, or you won't be able to make sense of it. But that kind of radical honesty, that strategy-free honesty where you just open your mouth and let words come out and see where it goes, that's the communication that really builds a strong relationship. And when you practice it, you basically practice not using strategy, you'll eventually become more and more practiced and experienced and familiar with it. It'll be easier for you to do. So my final message is I want you to notice those times where you're trying to solve a problem in your head rather than express it. Trying to think, how can I make them do what I want rather than just saying what you want? You're trying to say, how do I get rid of this resentment rather than just saying it? I resent you right now for some reason. You got some difficult emotion, if you bring it up at the family dinner, everyone's going to get all worked up. You think, how do I bring this up? Or how do I hide the fact? Just say it. Got something I want to bring up, but I'm trying to hide it because I'm scared of how you guys will react. Just say it. If you've got a life built on dishonesty, yes, this will cause some shit. Okay, but it's not shit that's going to be bad for you in the long run. If you being honest gets you fired, then you're in the wrong job. If you being honest destroys a relationship, it wasn't the right relationship for you. Okay. Now, all that being said, some people do not express themselves very well, and they think it's honesty when it's really something else. So on that note, I'm just going to give you a webinar I've done. I'll put it into the notes here. And it is the 3 principles. I've actually got 5 now, but this is older. 3 principles of powerful honesty. So if your honesty doesn't seem to go down very well, have a look at this. Have a listen to that podcast and compare that to how you express yourself, and you might see why it's happening that way. All right, well, that was a little rant by myself, as always. I hope you guys got something out of it. Please send through your questions, thoughts, comments. It's an ongoing discussion. And this, what you saw me doing right now, was a demonstration of what I'm talking about. I really had no fucking idea what I was going to say when this call started. Actually forgot I was doing this fucking thing. So I looked, I'm like, what's the topic? Jesus Christ. And I just let words come out of my mouth, and I wasn't sure where they were going to go. I'm not sure if I even made sense. It doesn't matter. I was just trying to be honest. It's that simple. And look, nothing bad happened to me. I'm fine, Yeah, of course, if any of you want more personal help with that, you can just email me, dan@brojo.co.nz. I'll put that in the old noties there as well. I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.